It is 6:07 p.m. Call to order the September 28th, 2022 meeting of the City Council Board of Ed School Budget Ad Hoc Committee. We have a quorum with, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 members present. As I see it, myself, Joe DeLucia, Stacy Gould, Swanjeet Singh, Mark Koulos, Kevin Saitani, and Christine DeStazio, all voting members. Our ex officio members that are present right now are the mayor, Peter Nystrom, city manager, John Salamone, the comptroller, Josh Pothier, the NPS business manager, Rob Serpensky, the director of student services for NPS, Lisa Hughes, and the assistant superintendent of schools, Tamara Gloucester. Is that everybody?
I'm sorry, Joe, did you say me, Kristen?
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, I checked you and didn't say your name. And our superintendent, Kristen Stringfellow. That should be everyone. Thank you. Okay, so you see our agenda for tonight is a special meeting. Virtual only via Zoom. As I said, we have a quorum in place. We have one item on our agenda tonight, new business. It is to review and comment on the city council resolution regarding transfer of the excess NPS budget funds into the non-lapsing account for unexpended education funds. So on that matter, who would like to speak first? I was hoping that maybe Mr. Serpensky could give us a rundown.
Yeah,
I know that he's prepared.
I'd be glad to. So welcome and thank you everyone for taking time out to come tonight. I've
Bob,
said
do
it before.
you have anything, a document you'd like to share with us on the screen?
No, I think I had sent stuff out before, but I have stuff in front of me. It's not uploaded, but you've heard me say it before, but I again want to commend the city council, the board of ed, the mayor's office and the city manager's office for jointly creating the non-lapsing fund a year and a half ago. I think it's a great concept that the legislative body of our state created, and we went ahead and did it. A lot of school districts have in their budget a contingency line item where they budget and it's limited to dealing with emergencies and not for normal operating expenses. We do not have that. As Kristen or Dr. Springfellow had talked about in the past, there is no capital fund either budgeted specifically for the Board of Ed. So this fund in its creation was meant to deal with that in any unforeseen emergencies. The first initial deposit was, again, 1.6 million a year and a half ago. And the Board of Ed has not entertained spending that at all on any capital projects or anything else. We've been fortunate in the last 2 years based on our budget and how we spend our money and managing it. We were able to fund some emergency situations out of our operating budget or using some of the ESSER grants that are made available to us. And I'll just talk about 5 of them real quickly that total $1.5 million. We did the Stanton boiler project, which was about $360,000. That we were able to use our operating budget for that project because of favorable variances in other ways. The teacher's boiler project, which is ongoing now, which is in excess of $600,000. Tamara and I have written a grant revision to ESSER 2 to fund that through that project. It's still in the state review process, and I check every day to see if they've approved that. We had to get creative, and that fell under one of the 4 priorities of school safety and social emotional well-being, and how the facilities improvements will facilitate better health and better learning environment and so on and so forth. So we're hopeful that'll be funded there. We did the Stanton parking lot for under $300,000. We did a teacher's air conditioning upgrade and the Bishop's elevator for $125,000. Those 5 items alone total $1.5 million. If we didn't have other sources of funding, they would have had to come. They could have come from the non-lapsing, or the Board of Ed would have to come before the city council to ask for more money. And that's one of our goals from a financial fiscal responsibility standpoint. I don't ever want to do that if possible. This year's a big piece of the surplus that we had this year came from salaries because of the difficulty in that Kristen and Tamara and Jamie had filling positions, and from special ed expenses coming in under budget. In a district this size, it's very easily for that $1.5 million in sped expenses to go over budget. That would be one potential use of the funds would to come from there. So we don't intend to use it for creating new items in the budget. It's to act as an emergency repair. We all know the capital needs of the district are well in excess of $200 million. So this alone wouldn't solve that if the bonding project didn't pass, but it could deal with a couple of roofs. It could deal with unexpected expenses. I think that this budget year could be difficult, as could next year. We won't know that probably until November, December, when we start to get an indication of where our tuitions are going to come in and where the sped placements are, so on and so forth. So that's my quick, brief opening, and I'll be quiet for now and be glad to answer questions or let other people contribute.
Unmute myself first. Any members have questions for either Mr. Sapensky or Superintendent of Schools on any of the issues? Mr. Kulos.
Yeah, Bob, do we have money set aside, or are we going to need additional funds for the boiler project?
Well, the boiler project, the grant revision we did a budget revision of $600,000. The quoted prices that came in were about $570,000. So we had a $25,000 contingency. As you know, from our Board of Ed meetings, we've run into some difficulties. I can give you a super quick update on where we stand. The separator, which is scheduled to be shipped tomorrow and is an integral part of the system, is scheduled to arrive October 5th to 6th. So if that does come in as planned, our contract, which is Nutmeg Company, is a local company, and they've been outstanding. They've made provisions to operate the boilers without the separator on a temporary basis, so we wouldn't have to engage the services of a temporary boiler company. We've had to, and that would be real expensive. So we could run into a problem there. We also ran into a problem with the expansion tank. We got notification last week that the tank that was ordered won't be available till January, and that won't work for our heating system. So we had to redesign that aspect of it, and we can go with two smaller tanks that are available. So I don't know if there'll be an added expense for that. So long story short, we should be able to meet the contingencies. And I'm glad you actually brought that up, because in the event that the state does not approve our grant revision, then our only source of funding for this would be the non-lapsing, because it's too late to take that from the existing surplus as the year's already closed.
So the state still hasn't approved the grant revision then?
No, they like everybody else are understaffed. Everyone's retiring. I did look up to see how long it takes. There was Tamara had done a grant revision to ESSER 1 back in June, and that took a month. So right now, ESSER 1 has an expiration date of September 30th. So I suspect most of the state resources are geared towards dealing with that grant and other grants that expire on Friday. So it could be a couple more weeks before we know.
So this is out of what, ESSER 2?
Yes, and that doesn't expire until September 30th of next year. From a philosophical standpoint, in terms of spending, and I've had this discussion with Josh, we try to use funding sources that are limited to very specific things and have time limitations first. So the state government did revise some of the project eligibility items, and they made this HVAC project one of them. So since this grant does expire in September of next year, we would rather use the funds from this rather than tap into the existing non-lapsing fund, because the non-lapsing fund doesn't have a time limitation, nor does it have restrictions in terms of only these specific areas, and you don't have to write long explanations. So funds in the non-lapsing fund can be used for any emergency. You know, if special ed expenses go up, if you know, you have a boiler go down, you need some emergency situation. And again, the district can't spend that money without Board of Ed approval.
So worst case scenario, we could take a $600,000 hit to the contingency fund.
That's correct, as it stands now.
All right.
So at a minimum, I'd want to, as insurance to the fund, see at least the 600,000 go into the fund. And based on the way things seem to fall apart, I've been here 16 months. I've already had 2 boiler projects, and with the exception of Kelly, all of the boilers are basically the same age of the buildings. They haven't been replaced, and those are big ticket items.
All right.
And, you know, in terms of the overall size of the fund, the city council did limit it to 4%. And if this deposit were to be made, would be fairly close to that limit. And if I look at our normal operating budget, our goal is to be never to ask for funding increase. So that means you have to come in at 0 or under. So I think a realistic target from a financial perspective is to have the budget come in within 0.25% to 0.5% of the actual budget. So if we're to do that, we'd be ending the year between $220,000 and $440,000 on an $88 million budget. So I'd be comfortable having a year-end balance like that. And I don't expect, unless we have extraordinary shift again in special education expenses or tuitions, to be in this position again.
Alderman Singh, you had your hand up.
Yeah, actually, Bob addressed one of it, but I'll just say my comment. Seems like ad hoc committee is solving the purpose for which it was made. And it's not just creating more communication between Board of Ed and City Council, but also it's addressing some of the trust issues. And I think overall, I just want to thank Board of Ed and all the management and Bob for doing this wonderful job. And I just wanted you to let you know the 4% thing that you just said. So I think it's maximum we can put in that account is 3.5 million. So we just have to be mindful of that as well. But you know, if we are not asking money in the operating budget to City Council more than, you know, what we expect, and we keep what we already have in these accounts, then I think we'll be in a good shape. So thank you.
Yeah, and if I can say one more thing, Joe.
Sure.
From a going forward standpoint, if I'm optimistic and the budget referendum regarding the school building project passes, people might say, why do you need this fund if you're going to get all new buildings? One, in the interim, something could happen, and the boilers that we've designed have been run by DRA to make sure they'd be compatible with future building projects. But also, if you have new facilities, things can still go wrong, but you could actually use this as one of its other intended purposes to fund some of the capital items that you still would need on an ongoing basis and not put those in the operating budget. So you could actually use this to offset some future operating expenses that would have to be funded in a budget process through the annual budget.
All right, thank you for that. The mayor has his hand raised. You have to unmute, Peter.
How's that?
Better.
Oh, good. Okay. I'm very concerned about the city's budget. I want to say that right up front, because I think it's going to be difficult next year, and particularly the year after that as well. I would support Bob's suggestion that the amount of funds from the dollars that are left over at this time to cover the boiler be placed, but I would also recommend that the remaining balance of that go to the city's designated fund balance, because I think we're all in for a difficult times financially going forward. Originally, I thought it all should go to the city side, but I would be supportive of what Bob suggested, covering in case the grant isn't approved for the use of the ERISA monies for that boiler. Because that has to happen. We can't have a school operating without heat. That's something that we must not ever allow to take place. So I just wanted to put that 2 cents in, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderwoman Gould, you had your hand raised?
Yes, thank you. My question's for Bob. Bob, how much is in the ESSER 2 grant fund?
Trying to recall off the top of my head. I might need to, let me see if I have the dollar amount in front of me. That grant was almost fully expended when we did the transfer. The largest one was ESSER 3, which has
Okay.
another 2.5 years to go. Do you remember offhand, Tamara, how much the total grant was? Was it 1.9 million or was it 7?
Correct. The total amount was like 1.9 million.
Yeah.
And so it is due, as you know, the end of this year. So it's another thing that we're working on that too, the revisions for that as well. So like you said, the revisions were submitted, and so we're still waiting for approval.
Stacy, you still have the floor.
Okay, so we have $1.9 million that is unencumbered in the ESSER 2?
No, that was, I think, the total size. I can,
Okay,
I don't know if I can access this system from here. I don't want to lose myself in the meeting.
Can we possibly send that to you, Alderwoman Gould? Is your question, I believe that it's all either encumbered or planned for.
okay, so,
But
Right.
I would want to, we weren't prepared for that because it's not a grants discussion, but we can follow up with you if that would be helpful, or we could sign off and come back on. What would be your preference?
well, if it's all encumbered, that's fine.
Or planned for.
Or yes, if it's all encumbered, you said, okay, we're gonna put this. What about ESSER 3? Is there any? What's in that grant?
I can tell you that total dollars were just under $17 million, and I don't have the details in terms of the divisions on how that money was going to be allocated. I know there was dollars in there for reading specialists and academic improvement plans, and that would be something Tamara or Kristen could speak to far better than I am. There was other aspects of the grant, but I don't have the ESSER 3 grant in front of me.
Okay,
I'm not sure if the way our grants work on the board side are the same as the way yours work on the city side. That part I'm unsure of. But in terms of our grants, they had to be planned for years previous to this. And so any adjustments that we've made for the planning, if you recall, we have a sort of like a special advisor from the Department of Education who met with Tamara and I for over a year and would walk through with us all of the items that would be approvable and those which would not be. And so I'm because it's a multi-year grant, it's not all encumbered yet, but it was all planned out more than a year ago. I want to say almost 2 years ago. And now we're just, if let's pretend that if we decided to buy a huge bookcase and the parts of the bookcase couldn't be manufactured in time, then Tamara would be permitted a revision. But we couldn't alter, as far as I understand, our general scope of the work that we had planned. So it would not be a fair statement to say it's all encumbered. It would be a fair statement to say that it's all planned and much of it is encumbered. But we can get you any specifics that you need on that particular grant. I have to either sign off, or Tamara would have to sign off in order to pull up that size of a document while we're on the Zoom.
mean-
Well, I guess I should maybe finish my question. Of that 17 million, is any of that money planned for, or can you appropriate any of that money for capital improvements? Boilers, roofs, parking lots, AC, etc.
I would say not for roofs or parking lots or anything like that. The heating, the HVAC systems were approved to address improving indoor air quality. So I'll read you just a couple I had to write this long narrative on how replacing our boiler systems would improve the learning environment and safety to students and staff, et cetera. Not our boilers are 50 years old and they don't work anymore. They wouldn't allow that. So I wrote things like replacing the outdated HVAC system will enable safer operation of the school by reducing exposure to environmental health hazards to support student health needs and improve the indoor learning environment in several ways. The reliability of the heating system will improve, reducing the risk of indoor temperatures becoming too cold for effective learning. Removing asbestos that's contained in the boiler system will eliminate the health risks associated with asbestos exposure within the school, and it's going to lead to cleaner air, blah, 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 blah. And, it's like, gee, this is all wonderful because students are going to be safer and learn better and so on and so forth. That's the environment under which we're seeking approval for this, not because it's a capital need and our boilers have failed.
Right.
So-
No, I understand that. I understand that, being comfortable in your environment, if you're sitting there and you're
And-
freezing cold or you're boiling hot, it's not conducive to good learning. I
And-
understand.
And as a general rule, as these grants progressed, the latest version became much more restrictive in terms of the strings attached and the methods that the school district has to use to measure effectiveness, and it's geared towards student engagement, helping the community, all the impacts of COVID on learning and minority populations. And you read some of the things and it's like, how do you write the words to show that improving reading is going to meet all this governmental stuff that they've put now in ESSER 3. I'm glad I don't have to write the narratives for that.
Mhm. Well, and what's the final dollar figure that we're looking to put into this non-lapsing account?
It might have changed a little bit because of the audit as it goes and some of the deposits that Josh and I discussed, and we had to out of our what I call the pre non-lapsing fund adjustment. We deposited almost $1 million into our health insurance fund and 600,000 into our workers' compensation fund. So after those amounts were done, I think it's roughly 1.6 million right now. So
No,
it
but
might be within a few $100s of that.
All right, so you have 1.6 million that we put away 18 months ago, and now you're looking to put another 1.6 million dollars in?
Yes, that's correct. And then we'd be almost at your cap of 4%. So we wouldn't be having this conversation again in the future unless we had to tap into it significantly.
Right.
And we had a surplus this size again. There's extenuating circumstances besides sound fiscal management and not spending money just to spend money. There's reasons why we have this, and I don't expect it to be again. And as the mayor said, we're all going to be facing difficult budgets going forward.
Right. And, with $17 million, although it's not sort of at your disposal, I'm worried about the optics of this. For the average person who's out there who says, well, wait a minute, the Board of Education got $17 million of taxpayer money for various uses, but now you want to take another $1.6 million and put it into this non-lapsing account. Why?
I
And
think
that's what
one of the, I
we
think
have to
one
be
of
able
the,
to answer to the taxpayer.
I think, I'm sorry, I don't have the floor. Did you want me to?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, I'm sorry. I apologize. I think I come from a district who always had a pretty secure fund balance in the Board of Education side, so that when emergencies arise, we wouldn't have to go back to the taxpayer. And so what I have often said in public meetings, in my former district, and I would say now, is that a fund balance is important on the city side, so that you're not going back and raising a tax increase mid-year. And it's important on the Board of Ed side for the same reason. And that's usually very well comforted by the bond issuing agencies. So your bond rating typically pings off of having planned well and having some reserve account for emergency purposes. Compared to where we were 4 years ago, where we were in an operational never-ending deficit, I'm imagining that if this facilities bond passes, our bond rating would be, I would venture to say, more favorable. That's always in the best interest of the taxpayer. If it doesn't pass, we're going to need to start very quickly making handicap accessibility changes that we have been, holding on making major changes to our buildings, knowing that this facilities project was coming up. And so that's what I would say. I don't know if that's helpful to you, but if asked, I would be able to say that. And I also have examples to draw from where we have had major shifts in need in Norwich and in other districts that I've worked in my lifetime, that come from special needs students needing things that we can't provide for them, specialized hospitalization, care, educative facilities. I'm not using the right words. Wheelchair accessible transportation that we hadn't planned for because the students were not known to us or had not moved in time for us to properly budget in the operational or the grant funding. And then we'd be back into a deficit again. And I think we've shown that's not ever going to be our intention. But if something occurs, an emergency that we haven't planned for, with all of these capital projects that need to be done, that you've all been so very supportive of, we don't want to come to you and have to say hat in hand, we'd like to go into your city reserves.
Right, and I understand that, sitting on here, and I'm sorry, the lights just went off here at work. I don't know why, but I haven't lost the computer yet, but the lights have gone out.
Motion detector, you got to stand up and wave. I have that problem at work too.
But the optics, $385 million is going to be the question on the ballot in November. And then we're putting another $1.6 million into this unrestricted fund balance. You've got $17 million that, that the taxpayers think is just at your disposal. You open your bottom drawer and you pay for this. And we have to be able to answer those questions about, well, if the bond passes, are you going to give back the money? If this happens, are you going to give back the money? So, and Bob, you can chime in anytime.
Okay, well, to add to Dr. Stringfell's comments and touch on what the mayor alluded to, as far as the future goes, currently we're in union negotiations with our teachers and some other unions, and given the economic climate, it's not ideal time to be negotiating with inflation and rising prices and so on and so forth. Our transportation contract expires the end of June, and we're getting ready to do an RFP for that now. That could, from what I'm seeing in other areas, there's significant increases in those items. So there could be some significant stresses on next year's budget. And one of the options of using non-lapsing funds is that you could, if it was collectively decided between the governing bodies, take money from the non-lapsing fund to fund some of these one-time increases. So it could help next year's budget. The other thing, even though we do have the $17 million, as I alluded to before, those grants are very specific as for what they can be used for, and as is the Alliance grant. If we would get an increase on the Alliance grant, we can't arbitrarily say, oh, good, I'm going to take $1 million out of our transportation budget and move it into there. It has to be a plan written, geared towards student improvement for new things. So just funding the regular everyday operations, you could tap into that. And as far as giving it back, if the bonding item passes, the way it can be given back is funding capital projects that would normally be in the budget, whether it's new trucks or new computers or things like that. So it doesn't have to sit there in perpetuity. It's good to have as the capital fund, the emergency fund, whether it's for special ed or technology items, and it can be used to alleviate future budgets when you have extraordinary circumstances.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. So I've got a couple. So first, Dr. Stringfellow, what would you say is the major revenue source? I hate to use that phrase, but so let's just say source of this of these excess funds. Is it what's been batted around as the district had difficulty hiring literally dozens, if not scores of people, and those salaries were never paid, so they were budgeted for but not paid? Is that the source, or are there some equal sources? What are the primary sources of the reason why there's $1.6 million as in excess right now?
So I would say we had a pandemic, and as a result of the pandemic, our workforce shortage was significant. And we know that last year we had probably 20 to 50 vacancies that were never filled or filled, and then another vacancy would come up. So we were not at all fully staffed last year. We had, in some cases, substitute teachers that were in positions, and in other cases we didn't have anybody in a position. This year we have less, we have a greater workforce, but we still have vacancies, and they are coming up continually. Another piece was our substitute teacher workforce. And so even in a pandemic, when things are tight and we don't have staffing, teachers unfortunately get ill and they need to have maternity leaves and surgical procedures. And ordinarily we had a pretty healthy line item that would support substitute teachers coming in. Right now, just like there's not a strong workforce, there's not a great sub pool either. And so we have had to combine sections. We've had to have specialty area teachers cover classrooms, principals and other administrators cover classrooms. It's not ideal. It's what has had to happen when there is a major labor shortage in the country. And so that's recovering. It's starting to recover. We are certainly better staffed this year, significantly than we were last year, but there are still vacancies. And I would say the third, Bob, question, at one point, it was some of our transportation. But I think that's back to being on budget. And
Yeah,
so,
well, I don't mean to interrupt, but for last year, there was significant savings on the sped transportation, and that was related to the reduction in the outplacements through fewer students and the efforts of the sped office. And so collectively, between tuition expense and sped transportation, that was about $1.6 million in savings. So between the efforts of sped, the luck of the draw of some students moving out, the activities in the sped office and our resource officers, that accounted for that, both on tuitions and transportation. Then the other big number you might recall was $500,000 less in unemployment expense. That was based on the previous years from being high with COVID, that diminished somewhat. And in part, that's how we met our 0 mil budget target last year, was by recognizing that's not going to happen again. And we were able to significantly lower our unemployment budget for the 22-23 budget.
And to piggyback on that, I think it's fair to say that this committee nor the public should forget that the Board of Ed ponied up $1.5 million at budget time in order to help us balance our budget for the entire city. Correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. The other question that I have, and it's really to kind of put this in perspective, in the terms of optics. Well, I think that some of the concerns about optics are oversimplifying it, and although I would agree that maybe that's where the bulk of taxpayers are going to be in an oversimplified mindset, it's our job to educate them, because if we get back down to the point where we're rolling the dice and we don't have sufficient funds in the non-lapsing account, we codify the budget second week in June. All right, it's done. And then in the middle of July, as has happened so many times, 2 kids with special needs come into the district, and and I don't mean to be alarmist about this, but they can easily be $500,000 a piece, and everybody's wondering where that $1 million is going to come from. We don't have to worry about that anymore if we have this healthy non-lapsing account. That cannot be overstated, because it's not just about, we have a non-lapsing account for capital projects. Right, our non-lapsing account also covers us for operational, student-driven needs, filling in those needs, and that money serves a huge purpose there. And I think that part of the narrative has fallen to the background because we've been focusing so much on facilities between the big projects that we have going on and the smaller, more immediate projects that are going on, relatively smaller. They're not small by any stretch of the imagination. I think we need to take a step back and keep a more global view of the purpose of this fund. One other thing, question I had, and this is really for Josh and John Salamone. When it comes to if part of this money were to be sent back to the city, it goes into undesignated fund balance because we already have a budget in place for this year. I'm pretty sure that's the case, and we've talked about it, but I just want to confirm that is the case.
Correct. So that would go into unassigned fund balance.
Okay, so here's the thing: over the last 5 budgets that I've been indirectly involved in, we've had this conversation about how we legally and in compliance with the charter use undesignated or unassigned fund balance as a revenue in the budget. So because I'm concerned that is not as easy as it sounds, and if let's just say we do a $600,000 goes into the non-lapsing account, has been suggested. $1 million comes back to the city. If we need that $1 million to attack the mill rate during our next budget cycle, is that $1 million readily available to the council to allocate? Or is there more of a process to that that's going to get in the way of doing that? Because if that is a cumbersome process, or if it is a next to impossible process, then this conversation is merely academic, because if we can't use that money, because once it's put into unassigned fund balance in order to budget balance the next budget, then what are we talking about here?
So when the money goes into the unrestricted fund balance, unassigned fund balance, our current financial policies, which were adopted by ordinance, say that the target range is 12 to 17%, so that once the fund balance is over 17%, funds can be appropriated by the city council to be used for, capital projects or other purposes. But the 12 to 17% is, kind of a range that seems to be well received by the bond rating agencies. And, I think if we changed our policies, it could be a bad signal for bond rating agencies.
Nonetheless, right, so that what that means is that we would have to write a new ordinance, as we have done in the past, to change those percentages. I know that right now, I shouldn't say I know, I believe that right now we're about 13.5%, roughly. Right, the last number that I remember, and let's just say, for argument's sake, that that's the case. We put another $1 million in there. Let's say it takes us to 15%. That's still in that 12 to 17 range. So it's not like the council could just direct you and the city manager, all right, move that $1 million and use it to reduce the mill rate in our next budget process that's going to happen next spring. We would have to go through the whole process of writing a new ordinance, having public hearings, changing the policy, even if it was just for one time. So it's not just drag and drop into another line item in the spreadsheet. It's actually, it would be an ordinance process to reclaim this money once it's in the undesignated fund balance. So is that a fair statement, right? Okay.
Yes.
All right. So, so in terms of, in terms of the idea of, well, if we just give it back to we'll move a portion of this money back to the city, and then, next year the council can use that to reduce the mill rate. That's, as I said at the beginning of my comments, that's not as easy as it sounds. So I'm afraid that we should not oversimplify what we're actually talking about here. Bob, you have your hand up, go right ahead.
Yeah, then I'll address your thought on using surplus funds to reduce a mill rate. Personally, that's sometimes not a good idea, because you have to make that up the following year. But then nevertheless, I've done that in a town when I was selectman, and cities do it. So if this money were to be put in fully into the non-lapsing fund, and next year we were in dire straits as a city.
Bob, I'm sorry.
Yes.
I hate to interrupt people, and certainly someone who is informative as you, but I'm looking at the chat. I see that the mayor's on a tight timeline, so I just want to give him a moment.
Oh, okay, I thought he had left.
Yeah, he's still there. I see his chat. His
Yeah,
comment.
go ahead. No, I'm fine. I'm fine.
Yeah, his comment is in the chat, but I'd like to give him a moment just before he has to leave the meeting.
Thank you, Joe. I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
The purpose of the funds going into what I'll call the city's rainy day fund traditionally are for catastrophic issues. They're not to be used for reducing the mill rate. I have no intention of asking that take place. I'm just concerned that the city's reserves will take additional hits. And I would also offer that the city's rainy day fund is still open upon emergency request of the Board of Ed. It's really an accounting basis, what we're discussing here, where the funds are placed at this time. And again, I think I'll call the compromise that Bob had talked about when we met with him at City Hall makes some sense. Make sure that the funds are there to cover the boiler request for teachers. We have to make sure that is done and in place. And if the grant is approved, then that increase will go on to the $1.6 million that are not spent at this time already. And then they still have ERISA fund access. Our taxpayers don't have ERISA funds to draw upon or apply for. It all comes down to the city, and the city's responsible for everyone, including the Board of Ed. I don't want that lost. Just because we have a dedicated fund now for emergencies for the Board of Ed doesn't mean you're on your own. We're still here. Thank you so much, Joe.
You're welcome. All right, Bob, sorry again to interrupt, but you please continue your comments.
Yeah, you know, the funds in the non-lapsing account can be used for any educational purpose. Like, I think the Board of Education and the city have a great working relationship. We pledged the year before not to spend the $1.24 million, and we honored that pledge. We were able to transfer expenses to another funding source and identified that in the budget and did not spend it. When we were asked to come to a $0 mil increase, we did that through a variety of methods. If we were in dire straits in the following year or some subsequent year, even though the intention of the fund is not to be used to reduce the mill rate, the city council, through its budgetary process, could request a $0 mil increase, or they could cut the Board of Ed's budget by a certain dollar amount. And if we were unable to reach the bottom line that was desired, we could tap into that fund to do that. It's not the intent of the fund, but in a sense, you still have access to the funds through that back door to make it happen. We all know then, whether it's Norwich or any other city, the Board of Ed is the largest impact to any taxpayer, and it's the biggest expense in a city. So that doesn't go away by not giving us the money, the ability to use that funds.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Close, I see that your hand is up, but I did have one more thing. I just wanted to let the mayor and Bob weigh in on my first comment. My second comment, it really isn't a comment. It's a question just for clarification from Dr. Stringfellow. It's my understanding that ESSA 3 represents the true transition. It actually started in ESSA 2, this transition towards capital projects that benefit kids to programs that are going to benefit kids, because we know that we're dealing with significant learning loss, you know, through the last 2.5 years of the pandemic. Is that a fair statement based on the plans that you've worked out?
Correct. There was no lead in of capital projects. Capital projects are sort of a small, like, we would have to be incredibly convincing to the State Department of Education and the guides that we have that we're working with to spend this money, because this is supposed to be recouping learning loss, accelerating instruction. This is all about children were alone, learning in their homes, in a virtual environment, all of the academic and social skills that they missed, that they need to recover in order to remain whole, academically, socially. That's what the money is intended to be. It also was to make certain that we have proper PPE and proper staffing from a safety perspective, and to make sure that we have the staff that can manage the pandemic effect medically, academically, and socially at the school level. So yes, I would agree with the statement that you made.
And along those lines, this boiler project revision is written under priority 3, which is school safety and social emotional well-being of the whole student and our school staff. So the language related to replacing boilers had to deal with how this will eliminate levels of stress on students and staff and provide a comfortable environment so they can focus on recovering and learning. And it was hard writing that instead of just saying the boilers need to be replaced because they don't work anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think another thing that needs to be said is that when I met you, when I came into the district, we did an assessment through NPU and Garland Roofing, and we had people come in to check the boilers and the handicap accessibility. And I made that information known to everybody and realized the state of the buildings that I inherited. And we have no capital improvement plan. We had no capital improvement fund on the board side to address these impending dire emergencies. They're not just boilers. And we've learned that through the full facilities review with all of your support, thankfully. But, you know, we knew that Stanton boiler was the #1 boiler that was literally not going to come on in the middle of the night. We knew that Teachers was the double boiler had failed. I'm thinking that's now an appliance that you put on your stove, but in essence, we have like the double boiler. And then there is a laundry list of other roof, handicap accessibility, boiler, etc. needs that could move in the prioritization line as quickly as teachers did. We are like holding on with a wish and a prayer with a majority of these facilities. And if they fail, I have nowhere to put the kids. So if we don't, and we all know if you've ever purchased an appliance, après COVID, you know, a family dishwasher or a refrigerator takes a year to come in. It took certainly mine a year to come in. And so that's what we're seeing now with the boiler projects. If we need something in an emergency, we're in a boatload of trouble. And where we don't have an alternative site. You know, I kid my staff and say, when I first met you, Benny's was for sale, and something deep in my toes said, please, the city, buy Benny's. I may need it if one of these boilers fails, so that we have a place to learn that's safe, warm, and dry. And so, you know, it's not all categorized yet.
Thank you. One more quick question before I call on people who have their hands raised and been patiently waiting. And this question goes back to Josh. Josh, by my budget book is on the other side of the house. I don't want to walk away from the screen, but by my quick math, I see, it seems to me that we have about $19 million in undesignated fund balance.
Yeah, we have in the $18 million range.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. That's all I have. Mr. Koulos, you were next. Thank you for waiting. Mark Koulos. Looks like he's frozen.
Yeah, his picture is missing.
Who's the next person in line for a question, Joe?
Yeah, I just grabbed my phone real quick, but Stacy, you were next while we work out the issue with Mark's technology. Why don't you go right ahead?
Okay, thank you. My question is for Josh. The unassigned fund balance, what's the percentage that's in there right now? Are we in that targeted 12 to 17, or we're below it, or we're above it?
We're a little over 12%.
Okay. Thank you. And my second half of this statement would be, and it's not necessary for Josh, just more of a general comment, that knowing that the city has a responsibility to the BOE, to our schools, to our students, you know, has there been any discussion about putting half of this, you know, amount into the non-lapsing account and the other $800,000 back into the unassigned fund balance, with the school knowing that if there is some catastrophic failure somewhere in the district, that the city council is going to have to allocate those funds to you to correct whatever the failure might be that was either unplanned or happened sooner rather than later. So I just want to know if anybody's thought about, splitting this up.
Yeah, we did. We talked about funding at a minimum level, the dollar equivalent of the teacher's BOE was because we had to withdraw that. So that was at a minimum 600,000. So splitting it would be 800,000. So we did discuss that, and Josh and I talked about that, and we talked about it with the mayor as well.
All right, so, but I guess, did those talks they didn't go anywhere? Is there something that you can share? I know that the mayor is not on. I don't know if Josh can share something, but.
Well, I was present in that meeting, and it was really just a brainstorming meeting. We didn't really come to any consensus. It really was for Kristen and Bob to bring us up to speed on pretty much everything we've heard tonight, on what the situation is, what the dollars look like, and then the idea that it was going to come to this committee for the conversation that we're having right now. So you pretty much know everything that was said in that meeting right now, Stacy.
Okay, so I'm just saying, could that be the compromise that we come to? We say, all right, they've got a $1.6 million surplus. They're going to put $800,000 into their non-lapsing account. $800,000 is going into the unassigned fund balance for the city, and then we see what happens with the vote in November. Because I don't, as I said before, and everybody knows that if there is some catastrophic whatever, the city is going to have to come up with the funds to make the repairs to whatever school it is, whether it's a boiler, a roof, air conditioning, etc.
Well, those are fair points. Bob Aldi, you have had your hand up. Thank you for waiting. Go right ahead. Oh, before you start, Stacy, I didn't cut you off, did I, Stacy?
No, not at all.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Bob.
Thank you, Joe. Stacy makes some very good points. However, let's be frank here. Last year we put back $1.2 million into a non-lapsing account that we did not spend. And we told you we wouldn't do it. This year you gave us a zero. You gave us a zero increase in our budget after we asked for, I believe it was a 2.3%. You said, no, you got to make it zero. Then you came back and said, well, no, we need another 1.5, and we did it. Now we have a referendum on the agenda for November the 8th. Should that not pass, and I hope it does, but should that not pass, not only are we going to have boiler problems, we're going to have what you call catastrophic incidents. We've got roofs that need to be replaced and need to be replaced almost, immediately, because with the teachers and the staff don't feel safe walking around with buckets in their classroom, catching all the rain. And we're coming into, we don't know what kind of winter we're going to have. One good storm, one good blizzard, and you're going to knock out a couple of schools.
Oops.
Is that it, Bob?
I mean, asking for to split the cost and put it in a non-lapse and another into a unfunded account. How much more do you want from the Board of Education? I mean, it's stop. Enough is enough. I'm done.
Okay, thank you. All right. Mr. Kulos, you've been patiently waiting. We got your technology squared away. So you have the
Yeah,
floor.
I lost, I
Internet.
lost my internet connection. Everybody froze and then it went away.
Yep.
Let me do a preliminary question with Josh. If the facilities referendum passes, is it going to be a series of bonds that we're going to have to go to the bond market for to fund the construction projects?
Yes.
All right, so your idea, Joe, of reducing the percentage of the fund balance, that may scare the bond market and give us kick us into a lower bond rating, which is not good.
Well, let me just respond to that. Let me be clear. I was not saying that we should reduce the percentage. Okay, I was saying that getting money out of the undesignated fund balance, okay, is more cumbersome than it sounds. That, you know, it's not just transferring it from your savings to your checking. It's not like that. It's a process. That was my point. I was not advocating.
Well, you did make a
reducing our
statement
percentage.
because Josh had said it was 12 to 17%, and you made a statement something like, well, let's kick around the lowering it to like 13 or 13.5. And then Josh was countering with, well, it may scare the bond market. So you don't want to do anything, especially if in your, you know, if we're in the middle of these major bond project, this and then the sewer refit and all of that, to scare the bond market to give us a, you know, where we're going to have to pay more money for the bonds that we're seeking.
Right. So again, let me be clear.
You know,
Wait a minute.
we
Hold
have,
on,
you know,
but
we
no,
have a
this
healthy
is,
balance
but this is
now.
recorded, so we need, you know, I want it to be accurate. Josh's
right.
Josh's comment was that if the undesignated fund balance, and this is how, as I understand it, if the undesignated fund balance were to go above 17%, that money could essentially be used relatively easily. If we want to take money out of undesignated fund balance while we're somewhere between 12 and 17, that takes more work because there's an ordinance that set that rate. In order to reduce that bottom threshold below 12%, that would definitely take council action, and that would be a very serious matter. So those are three distinctly different things. And so that's all,
Right.
you know, that again, my point was that taking money out of undesignated fund balance when you're between that 12 to 17 range is not as easy as transferring money from your household savings to your household checking. That's all. That's it.
All right. I just maybe misunderstood you or whatever. I thought you were changing proposing a change in the mechanism, but if you're not, that's perfectly fine. You know, as long as, you know, we have to be careful that nothing upsets the bond market and that they see that we're financially healthy as a city.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely.
All right.
Bob, you have something you'd
Yeah.
like to add?
I just have one last comment. One other significant expense item that Josh and I have talked about, and through the budget process last year, we looked at alternatives, is the cost of health insurance. As you all know, we're self-insured for both health insurance and workers' compensation. In the previous year, we were able to and had to, we deposited $2.7 million on the Board of Ed site into the health insurance fund to bring the reserve back up to 2.5 times average monthly claims. This year, we needed to deposit in another $900 and some thousand. So in the last 2 years, we've put in $3.6 million. I'm hopeful that our insurance costs don't continue to rise at the 20% level because of bad claims. And we've all associated that with COVID, people putting things off, so on and so forth. But if we were faced with having to make another significant deposit to our self-insurance health fund of $1 million next year, I'm not counting or planning on having $1 million left over to do that. That would be another potential use of the fund, non-lapsing fund, because we can't let the fund become insolvent. We have to do that, and we'd have to build that into the following year's budget to replenish that, and that would cause real budget problems when you're looking at salary increases, transportation increases, and so on and so forth. And then I'm done. I don't think I have anything else to say unless it's answering a question.
Okay. Can everyone still hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, well, hold on. I'm having a little technology glitch. I just want to make sure we're still recording. And we are.
This,
Okay.
my next, Mr. Joe, I have a, like, if everybody's done and said what they wanted to say, I want to bring a motion to the floor that we deposit the entire amount into a non-lapsing account.
All right, so motion's on the floor to deposit the entire NPS overage into the non-lapsing account. Is there a second to this motion?
I'll second it. Christine Pistachio.
So I'm taking notes for our minutes as I go, so just bear with me. So made and seconded. Is there any discussion?
If I could comment also,
well, hold on. Hold on.
all right.
Stacy had her hand up as we're in discussion on the motion.
No, my question was for Josh, so I'll pass.
Okay.
It's not on the
Right.
motion.
Oh, okay. So any other discussion on the motion? Mr. Cool?
Yeah, there's also pressure on that account, possible pressure with renegotiating the teacher's contract now, and settlements across the state have come in anywhere an additional 2% over a 3-year contract, the life of a contract. So things that were settling at like 9 to 11% range over a 3-year contract are now coming in from 12 to 16%. So it's anywhere from 1.5 to 2% increase per year on what the traditional settlements were. So there is pressure to remain competitive, especially in this job market. So we're, I feel that the teacher's contract is going to settle at a higher amount than traditionally.
Oh, fair point. Anything else, Mr. Close?
That's it as far as, a possible additional use to that account.
Any other discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I'll merely say that I think that this action makes sense at this time. This is a moving target. I believe that we can advocate for the council for the board and the council to move this some or part of this money from the non-lapsing account back into the undesignated fund balance at any time. But I think it's the prudent course that we wait until we see what happens in November with the referendum question before we make any or take any action that is difficult to unravel. I'm seriously concerned about programmatic needs that are going to pop up because we're not certainly not getting back to normal, but we're starting to see a lot of some of the normalcy in the demands on a school district post-COVID. And we know that we have significant issues, and they don't have to be catastrophic issues. And I'm not picking on any one person's comments or people's comments, but it doesn't have to be a catastrophic issue in my mind. It could be just the mere fact that we have buildings that are not handicap accessible by children and adults in wheelchairs. That alone, right, is not something that is traditionally budgeted for in a school's operational budget. This type of fund is what pays for that. And I think that we are making a smart move by putting this extra money into the non-lapsing account while we have it, because I don't believe that we will continue to have access to this kind of money as an overage as a rule. This is an exception, and I think we should capitalize on it, and we can always move money back to the city at any time we choose. So with that, discussion is closed, and by roll call, I will call for a vote of the members still present in the meeting at this time. Christine DeStasio,
Yes.
Carleen Sharmalis,
Yes.
Kevin Setani,
Kevin Setani votes yes.
Mark Kulos,
Yes.
Bob Aldi,
Yes.
Stacy Gould,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. It is unanimously carried by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 to 0 vote. Thank you all very much. It was a very informative conversation. This meeting was a long one, but well worth our time. I appreciate everybody's input, everybody's work and thoughts on this matter. Enjoy the rest of your week. And with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Kevin
Second,
second. I will second that motion.
Okay. Made and seconded. By roll call, Christine DeStasio,
Yes.
Carleen Sharmalis,
Yes.
Kevin Setani,
Yes.
Mark Kulos,
Yes.
Bob Aldi,
Yes.
Stacy Gould,
yes.
Joe DeLucia says yes. We are adjourned at 7:18 p.m. Again, thank you all very much for your time.
Night
Thank
to
you.
all, and
Night,
thank
everybody.
you.
Have a good night, everyone. Take care.